The iron bars felt cold against Victoria Everett's palms as she pressed herself against the narrow window of the Kansas State Asylum for the Insane. Watching the autumn rain streak down the glass, like tears, she no longer allowed herself to cry. 3 years she had been locked away in this nightmare, sent here by her stepbrother who wanted her inheritance, who had convinced a corrupt judge that her protests against his schemes were nothing more than the ravings of a madwoman. Tonight, she would either escape or die trying, because she could not spend another winter in this place where the screams never stopped and the smell of carbolic acid burned her throat with every breath. The asylum sat on the outskirts of Leavenworth, Kansas, a sprawling brick monstrosity built in 1866 that had become a convenient dumping ground for inconvenient women. Victoria had learned that bitter truth within her first week, meeting wives whose husbands wanted younger models, daughters whose fathers wanted their money, sisters whose brothers wanted their land. The year was 1879, and a woman's word meant nothing against a man's signature on commitment papers, no matter how false the accusations. She waited until the night nurse made her rounds, the heavy woman's footsteps echoing down the corridor with predictable rhythm. Victoria had been studying the patterns for months, counting the minutes between checks, noting which orderlies were lazy and which were thorough. She had saved every scrap of bread from dinner for the past week, mixing it with water to create a putty. She used to take an impression of the laundry room keys she had seen dangling from the housekeeper's belt. Finding a piece of metal to file into a crude key had taken another month, stealing a moment here and there in the workshop where they made the inmates weave baskets to sell in town. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed deafeningly loud in the quiet hallway. Victoria held her breath, but no alarm was raised. She slipped through the door, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. She had given up her shoes weeks ago, trading them to another inmate for information about the guard schedules. The woman had been committed for reading too many books, her husband claiming it made her uppity. The laundry room smelled of lye and damp fabric. Victoria found a plain brown dress hanging on the line, likely belonging to one of the kitchen workers, and pulled it on over her thin asylum shift. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and located a pair of worn boots that were only slightly too large. A bonnet completed the disguise. In the dim light, she might pass for a worker leaving late. The back door was locked, but not barred. Victoria had watched the cook leave this way countless times, had seen her turn the key and slip it into her apron pocket. Now Victoria used her makeshift key again, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. The door swung open, and the night air hit her face like a benediction. She ran. The rain soaked through her stolen clothes within minutes, but Victoria did not slow down. She crossed the muddy grounds, expecting at any moment to hear shouts behind her, the sound of pursuit. But there was only the rain, and her own ragged breathing and the distant whistle of a train that meant freedom. She followed the railroad tracks south, knowing they would lead her away from Leavenworth. Her feet ached and blistered in the ill-fitting boots, but she pushed on through the night. By dawn, she had put maybe 10 miles between herself and the asylum. It was not enough. It would never be enough until she could prove she was sane, until she could expose her stepbrother's lies and reclaim the life he had stolen from her. As the sun rose over the Kansas prairie, Victoria found herself approaching a small town. The sign read Nevada, Missouri, population 800. She had crossed the state line without realizing it. Her stomach cramped with hunger, and she knew she could not go much further without food and rest. But she had no money, and her appearance was hardly respectable. The dress was mud-splattered. Her hair hung in wet tangles around her face, and she probably looked exactly like what she was, an escaped inmate. Victoria skirted around the main street, keeping to the edges of town. She noticed a stable at the far end, with a large barn that might offer a place to hide. As she drew closer, she heard the sound of horses and a man's voice, low and soothing, talking to the animals. The barn door stood partially open. Victoria peered inside and saw a tall man brushing down a magnificent chestnut mare. He wore typical cowboy attire, denim pants, a work shirt, a leather vest, and a hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his environment. Victoria's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. The man's head snapped up and he turned to face her. His eyes were a startling green, his face tanned from outdoor work, probably in his mid-20s. A scar ran along his jawline, giving him a slightly dangerous appearance, but his expression was more curious than threatening. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight drawl that marked him as a man who had spent time in Texas. Victoria knew she should run, but she was so tired and so hungry that she could barely stand. "I need work," she said, lifting her chin and trying to sound confident rather than desperate. "I can clean, cook, mend. I am good with horses." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her bedraggled appearance. "You running from something?" "Yes," Victoria said, deciding that honesty might serve her better than lies. "But not from the law. I have committed no crime." "The law does not always care about crimes," he said, which struck her as an oddly perceptive observation. He set down the brush and walked closer. "My name is Gabriel Emerson. I run this stable and do ranch work for the local cattle operations. I could use help mucking out stalls and tending the horses if you are serious about working." "I am very serious," Victoria said. "My name is Victoria Everett." Gabriel extended his hand, and she shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and she felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the constant fear she had carried for so long. "There is a room above the stable," Gabriel said. "It is not fancy, but it has a bed and a stove. You can stay there in exchange for work. I will pay you $1 a week on top of room and board." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet," Gabriel said with a slight smile. "You have not seen how much manure 6 horses can produce. Come on, I will show you the room. You look like you could use some rest." The room above the stable was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a battered dresser, and a pot-bellied stove. A single window looked out over the town. To Victoria, it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. "There is a pump out back for washing," Gabriel said. "I will bring you some food. You settle in." After he left, Victoria sat on the bed and allowed herself to shake. She had done it. She had escaped. Now she just had to stay free long enough to clear her name. Gabriel returned with a plate of bread, cheese, and cold chicken, along with a jug of water. Victoria fell on the food like a starving animal, and he tactfully looked away until she had finished. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "Yesterday morning," Victoria said. "They feed us at the asylum, but not well." The word was out before she could stop it. Gabriel's expression did not change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. "You were in an asylum," he said. It was not a question. Victoria considered lying, but what was the point? He would find out eventually. "I was wrongly committed. My stepbrother wanted my inheritance. He paid a doctor to say I was insane, and a judge believed him." "What makes you say you were wrongly committed?" Gabriel asked. And Victoria noticed he said it carefully, without judgment. "Because I am not insane," Victoria said, meeting his eyes directly. "I am angry, and I am desperate, and I have been treated abominably. But I am not insane. I know my own mind. I know what my stepbrother did. He forged my father's will, changed the beneficiary from me to himself. When I discovered the forgery and confronted him, he had me committed within a week. No trial, no chance to defend myself. Just 2 men swearing I was mad, and that was enough." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I believe you." Victoria stared at him. "What?" "I believe you," Gabriel repeated. "I have seen enough of the world to know that the law does not always serve justice, and I have known enough women who were called crazy for the crime of being inconvenient." Something dark passed over his face. "My mother was declared insane for leaving my father. He beat her bloody every Saturday night, but when she finally ran away, he had her committed. She died in an asylum in Texas when I was 15. Victoria felt her heart constrict. I am so sorry. It was a long time ago, Gabriel said, but it taught me that sometimes the people locked away are the sanest ones in the room. You want to stay here and work, you are welcome. I will not turn you in. But you should know that if they are looking for you, this will be one of the first places they check. Small towns are not good for hiding. I cannot go back there, Victoria said fiercely. I would rather die. Then we will make sure you do not have to go back, Gabriel said. For now, rest. Tomorrow you can start earning your keep. Victoria slept for 14 hours straight, waking only when the afternoon sun streamed through the window. She felt stiff and sore, but more rested than she had been in years. She washed at the pump, braided her hair, and went down to the stable to find Gabriel. He set her to work immediately, showing her how he liked the stalls cleaned, where the feed was kept, how much water each horse needed. The work was hard and dirty, but Victoria threw herself into it with determination. Physical labor was a blessing after years of being confined to small rooms with nothing to do but weave baskets and stare at walls. Gabriel worked alongside her, and Victoria found herself stealing glances at him. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was always something worth hearing. He treated his horses with gentleness and respect, and he treated Victoria the same way, as if she were a person worthy of consideration rather than a broken thing to be pitied or feared. On her third day in Nevada, Missouri, Victoria was forking hay into the stalls when she heard horses approaching. She looked out to see two men in uniform riding up to the stable. Her heart stopped. Easy, Gabriel said quietly, appearing at her elbow. Let me handle this. The men dismounted, and Victoria recognized the uniforms as belonging to asylum staff. One of them was holding a piece of paper. Afternoon, officers, Gabriel said pleasantly. What can I do for you? We are looking for an escaped inmate, the taller man said. Woman by the name of Victoria Everett. She fled from the Kansas State Asylum 4 days ago. Have you seen anyone matching this description? He held out a paper with a rough sketch of Victoria's face. Can't say I have, Gabriel said, studying the picture. But I will keep an eye out. Dangerous, is she? Highly unstable, the man said. Prone to delusions and violent outbursts. If you see her, do not approach. Send word immediately. Victoria, watching from inside the stable, felt rage burn in her chest. Violent outbursts. She had never raised a hand to anyone in her life. Will do, Gabriel said. You boys want some water before you head out? Long ride from Kansas. Much obliged, the shorter man said. Gabriel drew water from the pump while the men watered their horses. Victoria stayed hidden, barely breathing. Finally, the men mounted up and rode off toward the center of town. Gabriel returned to the stable. They will be going door to door, he said. We need to make you less recognizable. He disappeared and returned with scissors and a bottle of something dark. We are going to cut your hair and dye it, he said. Change your appearance enough that no one will connect you to that sketch. Victoria hesitated only a moment before nodding. Her hair had always been her one vanity, falling in golden waves down her back. But vanity was a luxury she could not afford. Gabriel worked carefully, cutting her hair to shoulder length, and then dyeing it a deep brown with a mixture he made from walnut hulls. When he was finished, Victoria barely recognized herself in the small mirror he provided. Better, Gabriel said. Now, if anyone asks, you are my cousin from St. Louis. Come to help with the stable while I recover from a broken leg. Your leg is not broken, Victoria pointed out. It was broken, Gabriel said. 2 years ago, kicked by a horse. Anyone who knows me will remember it. The timeline works. Over the following weeks, Victoria settled into a routine. She worked in the stable from dawn until dusk, learning the names and personalities of all the horses. Gabriel proved to be an excellent teacher, patient and thorough. He taught her how to read a horse's mood, how to check for lameness, how to treat minor injuries. In the evenings, they often sat together on the porch of the stable, watching the sun set over the Missouri plains. Gabriel talked about his life, how he had left Texas after his mother died, drifting from town to town doing ranch work until he had saved enough to start his own business. Victoria talked about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father who had been a lawyer, her mother who died when she was 12. She told him about her stepbrother Edward, who had seemed kind at first but revealed his true nature after their father's death. He was always jealous, Victoria said one evening. My father left everything to me because he knew what Edward was. But Edward could not accept it. He forged a new will, made it look like my father had changed his mind. When I found the original will, hidden in my father's study, and realized what Edward had done, I confronted him. That was my mistake. I should have gone to the authorities first. What did he do? Gabriel asked. He told me I was mistaken, that the grief had affected my mind. Then he started telling other people the same thing. He brought in doctors who examined me and declared I was suffering from hysteria and delusions. Within a month, I was in the asylum. No one believed me. Everyone thought I was mad. Her voice broke. He took everything from me, my home, my freedom, my reputation, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. Gabriel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we could try to get the truth out. Fight back. How? Victoria asked bitterly. I have no proof. The original will disappeared. Edward probably burned it. And even if I could prove the forgery, who would believe an escaped asylum inmate over a respected businessman? Then we find a way to make them believe, Gabriel said. I know a lawyer in Kansas City. Good man, honest. If we can get evidence, he might be able to help. Victoria felt a flicker of hope, dangerous and painful. You would help me do that? I told you I believed you, Gabriel said. I meant it. As autumn turned to winter, Victoria found herself thinking about Gabriel more and more. She noticed the way his hands moved when he worked with the horses, gentle but confident. She noticed the way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her words mattered. She noticed the way he smiled, rare but genuine, lighting up his whole face. She tried to tell herself it was just gratitude, that she was confusing appreciation for his kindness with something deeper. But she knew she was lying. She was falling in love with him, and the knowledge terrified her. She had nothing to offer him but trouble. Her very presence put him at risk. If the authorities discovered he was harboring an escaped inmate, he could face serious consequences. One cold December morning, Victoria was carrying water to the stalls when she slipped on a patch of ice. Gabriel caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong around her waist. For a moment they stood frozen, inches apart. Victoria could feel the warmth of his body, smell the scent of leather and hay that always clung to him. Careful, Gabriel said, his voice rough. Thank you, Victoria whispered, unable to look away from his eyes. Gabriel's gaze dropped to her lips, and Victoria's breath caught. She thought he was going to kiss her, hoped he would, but instead he gently set her back on her feet and stepped away. The ice is treacherous, he said. Watch your step. Victoria felt disappointment wash over her, followed by shame. What was she thinking? Gabriel was her employer, her protector. He had shown her nothing but kindness, and here she was entertaining romantic fantasies like some foolish girl. But that night, as she lay in her narrow bed, she heard footsteps on the stairs, a soft knock on her door. Victoria? Gabriel's voice was quiet. Are you awake? She opened the door to find him standing there, hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I cannot stop thinking about you, he said bluntly. I know the timing is terrible. I know you have enough to worry about without me adding complications. But I needed you to know. You are the most courageous, intelligent, remarkable woman I have ever met. And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I would count myself the luckiest man alive. Victoria felt tears spill down her cheeks. I was committed to an asylum, she said. I am wanted, I have nothing. I might never be able to clear my name. I do not care about any of that, Gabriel said. I care about you. Victoria closed the distance between them and kissed him. Gabriel made a sound, low in his throat, and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her as if he would never let go. The kiss was everything Victoria had dreamed of and more, tender and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I think I have loved you since the moment you walked into my stable, looking like a half-drowned cat, and told me you were good with horses." Victoria laughed through her tears. "I love you too. I have been trying not to, but it is useless. You are impossible not to love." They stood in the doorway, holding each other, and Victoria felt something she had not felt in years: hope. The next morning, Gabriel announced that they were going to Kansas City. "We are going to see that lawyer I told you about," he said. "Martin Foster. He owes me a favor, and more importantly, he hates corruption. If anyone can help us figure out how to fight your stepbrother, it will be him." The journey to Kansas City took 2 days by horseback. Victoria rode one of Gabriel's steadier mounts, a gentle bay mare named Rosie. They traveled carefully, avoiding main roads, and staying at small inns where no one looked too closely at strangers. Martin Foster's office was in a modest brick building near the courthouse. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Gabriel explained the situation, Martin listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "This is a difficult case," Martin said when Victoria finished her story. "But not impossible. The key is the forged will. If we can prove that document is fraudulent, everything else falls apart. Your stepbrother's entire claim to your father's estate rests on that forgery." "But the original will is gone," Victoria said. "Edward destroyed it." "Perhaps," Martin said. "But wills are often filed with the probate court. Even if your stepbrother destroyed your personal copy, there may be another record. And forgers always make mistakes. No matter how careful they are, there are always tells. Different ink, inconsistent handwriting, anachronistic paper. We just need to examine the document closely enough to find them." "How do we get access to the will?" Gabriel asked. "That is the tricky part," Martin said. "It will be in the probate records in Pennsylvania, wherever your father's estate was settled. We would need to travel there and petition the court for access. Given your current situation, Miss Everett, that presents obvious risks." "Then I will go," Gabriel said. "I can request copies as someone investigating a business opportunity with Edward Everett. It is not uncommon for potential partners to review someone's financial history." "That could work," Martin agreed. "In the meantime, Miss Everett, you need to stay out of sight. The asylum is still looking for you. I have a colleague in St. Joseph, Missouri, who might be willing to house you temporarily. She is a doctor, very progressive, understands the abuses that occur in asylums. I think she would be sympathetic." Victoria looked at Gabriel. The thought of being separated from him made her chest ache, but she knew it was the sensible course of action. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4, Gabriel said. "Pennsylvania is a long way. But I will come back, Victoria. I promise." The parting was harder than Victoria had imagined. She clung to Gabriel at the train station, breathing in his scent, memorizing the feel of his arms around her. "Be safe," she whispered. "You too," Gabriel said. He kissed her thoroughly, not caring who saw. "I love you. Remember that." "I love you too." Dr. Sarah Mitchell turned out to be a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Her home in St. Joseph was comfortable and quiet, filled with medical books and plants. She made Victoria feel welcome immediately. "Martin told me about your situation," Sarah said over tea. "I want you to know that I believe you. I have seen too many women railroaded into asylums for speaking up or being inconvenient. The whole system is rotten." "Have you ever worked in an asylum?" Victoria asked. "I did my training at one," Sarah said, her expression darkening. "It was the most horrifying experience of my life. women locked in cells for the crime of having opinions, beaten for refusing to be quiet, drugged into submission. I left after 6 months and swore I would spend the rest of my career fighting such abuses. Victoria felt a kinship with this woman who understood. Over the following weeks, Sarah became a friend and confidant. She taught Victoria about medicine, let her read from her extensive library, treated her as an intelligent person rather than a damaged one. But at night, Victoria lay awake worrying about Gabriel. She had no way to contact him, no way to know if he was safe. She counted the days, willing them to pass faster. 4 weeks went by, then 5. Victoria tried not to panic, but she could feel fear gnawing at her. What if something had happened to him? What if her stepbrother had discovered what he was doing? On the 43rd day, a telegram arrived. Sarah brought it to Victoria with a smile. "It is from Gabriel," she said. "He is on his way back. He will be here tomorrow." Victoria's hands shook as she read the brief message. "Found what we needed. Coming home. Love. G." She barely slept that night. The next day, she paced Sarah's parlor until the doctor laughingly told her to sit down before she wore a hole in the carpet. When Gabriel finally arrived, dusty from travel but grinning, Victoria flew into his arms. "I missed you," she said against his chest. "I missed you too," Gabriel said. "But I have good news." Martin was right. The will was filed with the probate court in Philadelphia, and it is definitely a forgery. The ink is wrong, the paper is wrong, and most damning of all, one of the witnesses listed died 2 years before the will was supposedly signed. Victoria pulled back to look at him. "You mean we can prove it?" Martin thinks so. He has already filed a motion to reopen the probate case. He is arguing that new evidence has come to light suggesting fraud. The court has agreed to a hearing. "But I cannot testify," Victoria said. "I am a wanted fugitive." "That is the other part," Gabriel said. "Martin has been in contact with the asylum. He has convinced them to agree to an independent medical evaluation. If a different doctor examines you and declares you sane, they will drop the commitment order." Victoria felt dizzy with hope. "Is that possible?" "Dr. Mitchell has agreed to perform the evaluation," Gabriel said. "Martin will submit her findings to the court. Between the forged will and proof that you were wrongly committed, we have a real chance of winning this." The hearing was scheduled for February 1880 in Philadelphia. Gabriel, Victoria, Martin, and Dr. Mitchell traveled there together. Victoria was terrified of being arrested the moment she set foot in Pennsylvania, but Martin had obtained a temporary stay of the commitment order pending the medical evaluation. Everett appeared at the hearing with his own lawyer, a slick man who tried to argue that Victoria was delusional and dangerous. But Dr. Mitchell's testimony was devastating. She described in clinical detail the conditions Victoria had endured, the lack of any genuine symptoms of insanity, the clear evidence that she had been committed for financial gain rather than medical necessity. Then Martin presented the evidence of the forged will. He walked the judge through every inconsistency, every impossibility. The witness who was dead when he supposedly signed, the ink that had not been manufactured until after the date on the will, the handwriting that did not quite match the samples of the other documents their father had signed. Edward tried to bluster and deny, but his lies crumbled under scrutiny. The judge's expression grew colder and colder as the truth emerged. The ruling came down swift and hard. The will was declared fraudulent. Edward was ordered to return all assets to Victoria, and criminal charges were filed against him for fraud, forgery, and false imprisonment. The commitment order was officially vacated, with the judge issuing a scathing rebuke of the doctors and officials who had participated in Victoria's unlawful detention. Victoria walked out of the courthouse a free woman, her reputation restored, her inheritance returned. Edward was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence. Gabriel swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. "You did it," he said. "You won." "We did it," Victoria corrected. "I could never have done this without you." They returned to Nevada, Missouri, as spring was breaking over the plains. Victoria's father's estate was substantial, more than enough to secure her future. But she discovered she had no desire to return to Pennsylvania, to the house where her father had died and her stepbrother had betrayed her. I want to stay here, she told Gabriel one evening as they sat on the porch of the stable, watching the sunset. If you will have me, I will have you, Gabriel said. I will have you forever if you will marry me. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. It was my mother's, he said, the only thing of hers I have left. I would be honored if you would wear it. Yes, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I will marry you. They were wed in May 1880 in a simple ceremony at the church in Nevada, Missouri. Dr. Mitchell traveled from St. Joseph to attend, and Martin Foster came from Kansas City. The whole town turned out. The people who had come to know Victoria as Gabriel's hardworking cousin, now celebrating her as his bride. Victoria wore a dress of pale blue silk, her dark hair pinned up with flowers. Gabriel wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed her in front of everyone, and Victoria felt her heart might burst with happiness. They honeymooned in Colorado, traveling through the mountains on horseback, sleeping under the stars. Gabriel taught Victoria how to fish and shoot, and Victoria taught Gabriel how to read poetry, sharing the books she had loved in her youth. I never thought I could be this happy, Victoria confessed one night, as they lay wrapped in blankets by the fire. After everything that happened, I thought I would spend the rest of my life afraid. You never have to be afraid again, Gabriel said, pulling her close. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you feel safe and loved. When they returned to Nevada, they used Victoria's inheritance to expand the stable business. Gabriel had always dreamed of raising horses, not just boarding them, and now they had the capital to make it happen. They bought land on the edge of town, built a proper house with a big kitchen and a library for Victoria's growing collection of books. Victoria threw herself into learning everything she could about horse breeding. She discovered she had a knack for it, an eye for good bloodlines and strong conformation. Within 2 years, their ranch was producing some of the finest horses in western Missouri. But more than the success of the business, Victoria treasured the life she and Gabriel built together. She loved the rhythm of their days, working side by side, sharing meals, talking late into the night, about everything and nothing. She loved the way Gabriel looked at her, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. She loved the way he touched her, gentle and passionate and reverent. In the spring of 1882, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. Gabriel was overjoyed, already planning how to baby-proof the stable and wondering aloud whether their child would inherit Victoria's intelligence or his stubbornness or both. Both, Victoria said, laughing. Definitely both. We are going to have our hands full. Their son was born in December 1882, a healthy baby boy with Gabriel's green eyes and a powerful set of lungs. They named him James after Victoria's father. Gabriel proved to be a devoted father, endlessly patient with the squalling infant. Victoria would often find him walking the floor at night with James cradled against his chest, singing old cowboy songs in a surprisingly pleasant baritone. You are a natural, Victoria told him. I had a good mother, for the short time I had her, Gabriel said. I want to do right by our children. Children? Victoria said, raising an eyebrow. Already planning on more? At least 3 or 4, Gabriel said with a grin. Maybe half a dozen. This house is too big for just one. Victoria laughed. We will see about that. But Gabriel got his wish. 2 years later, Victoria gave birth to twin girls, Rose and Lily, who looked like miniature versions of their mother. Then came another son, Thomas, in 1887, and finally a daughter, Grace, in 1890. The house was indeed full, ringing with laughter and the sound of children's feet thundering up and down the stairs. Gabriel taught the boys to ride almost before they could walk, while Victoria made sure all the children, boys and girls alike, learned to read and think for themselves. I will not have my daughters grow up thinking their only value is in being pretty and agreeable, Victoria declared. They will have educations. They will have choices. Gabriel agreed wholeheartedly. He had seen what happened to women without choices, without anyone to believe them. As the years passed, Victoria sometimes thought about her time in the asylum, but the memories no longer had the power to hurt her. She had survived. She had fought back. She had won. And more than that, she had found love in the most unexpected place, with a man who saw her not as damaged or crazy, but as strong and valuable and worth believing in. Gabriel had saved her, not by rescuing her, but by trusting her, by listening when no one else would, by standing beside her when she fought for her freedom. That gift was worth more than all her father's money, more than the restored reputation, more than anything. One evening in the summer of 1895, Victoria and Gabriel sat on the porch of their house, watching their children play in the yard. James was 15 now, tall and serious, helping his younger brother Thomas fix a broken wagon wheel. The twins were 13, racing their horses across the field with the reckless confidence of girls who had never been told they were not allowed. Little Grace, 5 years old and already showing signs of her mother's stubborn streak, was attempting to train one of the barn cats to fetch. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked Gabriel, "taking in a desperate woman who showed up at your stable all those years ago?" Gabriel took her hand, the hand that still wore his mother's ring, and kissed her fingers. "Not for a single second," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Victoria Emerson. You and those wild children of ours." "They get the wildness from you," Victoria said. "They get the stubbornness from you," Gabriel countered. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Missouri plains, over the life they had built together, from ashes and determination and love. "I was thinking," Gabriel said, "we should take the children to visit Dr. Mitchell soon. The older ones are old enough to understand what she did for us. I want them to know that story, to understand how important it is to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. And to believe people when they tell you their truth," Victoria added, "especially when no one else will." "Especially then," Gabriel agreed. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the girl she had been, locked in that asylum, pressing her face to the bars and dreaming of freedom. She wished she could tell that girl that it would be all right, that escape was possible, that love was waiting on the other side of fear. But that girl had been stronger than she knew. She had saved herself. Gabriel had simply been there to believe her, to stand with her, to love her. And in the end, that had made all the difference. As the stars began to come out over the Kansas prairie, Victoria felt Gabriel's arm tighten around her shoulders. Their children's laughter floated on the evening air. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied, and another answered. The stable lights glowed warm and golden in the gathering dark. This was home. This was family. This was the life she had fought for and won, and it was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined in those dark asylum days. "I love you," Victoria said. "I love you too," Gabriel replied. "Always have. Always will." And as they sat together in the peace of the evening, surrounded by the life they had built and the children they had made, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The nightmare was over. The dream had come true. And every day forward was a gift, precious and earned and treasured beyond measure. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of seasons changing. James grew into a fine young man, serious and thoughtful like his mother, with his father's way with horses. In 1898, he married a schoolteacher from Kansas City, a bright woman named Eleanor, who reminded Victoria of Dr. Mitchell. They settled on a piece of land adjacent to the ranch, building their own stable and starting their own family. The twins, Rose and Lily, both inherited their mother's fierce independence. Rose went to college in St. Louis, studying law with the intention of helping women who found themselves in situations like Victoria had faced. Lily became a veterinarian, one of the first women in Missouri to do so, working alongside her father on the ranch. Thomas proved to have a gift for business, expanding the horse breeding operation and establishing connections with buyers as far away as California and New York. Under his management, the Emerson Ranch became known throughout the West for producing quality animals. And Grace, the baby, grew up wild and free, riding before she could read, fearless and bold. She had no interest in settling down, instead, choosing to travel with Wild West shows, performing trick riding and roping demonstrations. Victoria worried about her, but Gabriel just laughed. "She is your daughter through and through," he said. "She knows her own mind and will not be told what to do. Sound like anyone you know?" Victoria had to admit he was right. Grace wrote them letters from all over the country, full of adventure and excitement, and Victoria lived vicariously through her youngest daughter's freedom. In 1903, Sarah Mitchell passed away peacefully in her sleep. Victoria and Gabriel traveled to St. Joseph for the funeral, along with Martin Foster, who had remained a close friend over the decades. The church was packed with women whose lives Sarah had touched, whose stories she had believed, whose battles she had helped win. "She was a remarkable person," Martin said at the reception afterward. "The world needs more people like her." "The world needs more people willing to believe women," Victoria said. "That is what she taught me. Our voices matter, even when people try to silence them." In 1905, Victoria received word that her stepbrother Edward had died in prison. She felt nothing. The man who had tried to destroy her life had become irrelevant, a footnote to her story rather than the defining chapter he had intended to be. She did not attend his funeral. She had more important things to do, like helping Rose prepare her first case, defending a woman wrongly committed to an asylum, and celebrating Thomas's engagement to the daughter of a rancher from Colorado. Gabriel turned 50 that year, his dark hair now liberally streaked with silver, the lines around his eyes deeper. But to Victoria, he was as handsome as the day she had stumbled into his stable, desperate and afraid. Maybe more so because now those lines came from laughter, from years of smiling, from a life well lived. "We are getting old," Gabriel said one evening, studying his reflection in the mirror. "Speak for yourself," Victoria said. "I am aging like fine wine." Gabriel laughed and pulled her into his arms. "You are aging beautifully. You have always been beautiful from the moment I first saw you." "I was half drowned and covered in mud," Victoria protested. "You were magnificent," Gabriel said, terrified and trying so hard not to show it, willing to do anything to survive. "I fell in love with you right then, even though I did not realize it yet." Victoria kissed him, soft and sweet. After all these years, his kiss still made her heart race. "I fell in love with you the moment you said you believed me. No one had believed me in so long. You will never know what that meant." "I think I have some idea," Gabriel said. "Because you believed me too. Believed I could be better than my father, that I could build something good and lasting. We believed in each other. That is what made us strong." In 1910, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a party that drew people from 3 states. The ranch house was overflowing with family and friends, with neighbors and business associates, with all the people whose lives had intersected with theirs over the decades. James and Eleanor brought their 4 children. Rose came from St. Louis with her law partner, a brilliant woman named Catherine. Lily brought her husband, a fellow veterinarian she had met at a conference. Thomas and his wife, Sarah, were expecting their second child. And Grace rode in from Wyoming, where she was running a horse ranch with another woman from the Wild West shows. Victoria stood on the porch, looking out at the celebration, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this family, this love. It was everything she had never dared to hope for during those dark asylum years. Gabriel appeared beside her, pressing a glass of champagne into her hand. "Happy anniversary, my love." Happy anniversary, Victoria echoed, clinking her glass against his. 30 years. Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like yesterday, Gabriel said. Other times it feels like you have always been here, like I cannot remember a time when you were not part of my life. I know what you mean, Victoria said. The bad times seem so distant now, like they happened to someone else. But the good times, all these years with you, they feel so vivid and real. That night, after the guests had departed and the house had fallen quiet, Victoria and Gabriel lay in bed together, hands linked in the darkness. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come to my stable that day? Gabriel asked. If you had gone somewhere else, found someone else? I try not to think about it, Victoria admitted, because I cannot imagine my life without you. I do not want to imagine it. You saved me, Gabriel. You saved yourself, Gabriel said firmly. You escaped. You survived. You fought. I just had the immense good fortune to be there when you needed someone to believe in you. Then we saved each other, Victoria said, because you needed someone to believe in you too, someone to help you build something lasting, to prove you were nothing like your father. Then I will accept that, Gabriel said. We saved each other, and we built something beautiful. As Victoria drifted off to sleep in Gabriel's arms, she thought about the young woman she had been, the one who had pressed her face to asylum bars and dreamed of freedom. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that woman that everything would be all right. That escape was just the beginning. That love was waiting, real and true and lasting. That she would not just survive but thrive, building a life richer and fuller than anything she had imagined in those dark days. But maybe that young woman had known somehow. Maybe that was why she had kept fighting, kept hoping, kept believing that somewhere out there was a better life waiting to be claimed. And she had been right. The better life was here, in this house, in this bed, in these arms that held her safe and warm and loved. The years continued their steady march. Gabriel began to slow down, his body bearing the marks of a lifetime of hard work. In 1915, he handed over the daily operations of the ranch to Thomas and Lily, though he still went out to the stables every day to check on the horses. Victoria spent her time writing, finally putting her story down on paper in the hopes that it might help other women in similar situations. Her memoir, published in 1917, became a bestseller and sparked renewed conversations about asylum reform. She received letters from women all over the country thanking her for telling her story, for giving voice to their experiences. Some of the letters were from women who were still locked away, smuggled out by sympathetic nurses or family members. Victoria did her best to help where she could, connecting them with lawyers like Rose, with doctors who would provide honest evaluations, with resources to fight their wrongful commitments. You are still fighting, Gabriel observed one day, finding Victoria at her desk, surrounded by correspondence. I will never stop fighting, Victoria said. As long as women are being locked away for being inconvenient, for speaking up, for wanting control over their own lives, I will fight. Gabriel kissed the top of her head. That is one of the many reasons I love you. In 1920, women gained the right to vote. Victoria, now 64 years old, cast her ballot with tears streaming down her face. She thought about all the women who had not lived to see this day, who had died in asylums or abusive marriages or in childbirth, never knowing that change was coming. She voted for them and for herself and for her daughters and granddaughters. Gabriel, now 65, stood beside her at the polling place, beaming with pride. I wish my mother could have seen this, he said quietly. I think she knows, Victoria said, taking his hand. Somewhere, somehow she knows. As they walked home from the voting station, Victoria felt the weight of years pressing down on her. Her body was not what it once was. Her hair was pure white now, her hands gnarled with arthritis. But her mind was still sharp, her spirit still fierce. She had lived a good life, a full life, a life worth fighting for. Gabriel's health began to decline in 1922. The doctor said it was his heart, worn out from years of hard work and hard living. Gabriel accepted the news with equanimity, more concerned about how Victoria would manage without him than about his own mortality. "You will be fine," he told her one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching yet another sunset. "You are the strongest person I have ever known." "I do not want to be strong without you," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "I do not want to face this world alone." "You will never be alone," Gabriel said, gesturing to the house behind them, full of children and grandchildren. "Look at what we built together. All those people, they are part of us. They carry us forward." Gabriel passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cool October night in 1923. Victoria woke to find him gone, his hand still clasped in hers, a slight smile on his face. She wept then, great wrenching sobs that shook her entire body, mourning the loss of her partner, her love, her best friend. The funeral was enormous, people coming from all over the country to pay their respects to a man who had been kind and honest and true. Victoria stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and spoke about the man Gabriel had been. "He believed me when no one else did," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "That simple act of faith changed my life. He taught me that love is not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day, about choosing to stand beside someone even when it is difficult. He was a good man, a good husband, a good father, and I will miss him every day for the rest of my life." After Gabriel's death, Victoria threw herself into her advocacy work with renewed vigor. She established a foundation in Gabriel's name to help women wrongly committed to asylums, providing legal aid and medical evaluations. She worked with Rose, now a prominent lawyer in St. Louis, to push for legislative reforms. She gave speeches around the country, telling her story over and over, refusing to let people forget what had been done to her and countless other women. "Why do you keep doing this?" Grace asked her one day. "You are 70 years old, Mother. You should be resting, enjoying your grandchildren." "I will rest when I am dead," Victoria said. "Right now there is still work to be done." But privately, Victoria knew her time was running short. She could feel her body failing, her energy waning. She was tired, bone deep, tired, ready to rest. In the spring of 1928, Victoria fell ill with pneumonia. She knew, with the certainty of long experience, that she would not recover. Her children gathered around her bedside, along with her grandchildren and even some great-grandchildren, babies she could barely remember the names of. "Do not mourn too long," Victoria told them. "I have lived a good life, a long life. I have loved and been loved. I have fought for what I believed in. I have seen my children grow and thrive. I have no regrets." "Not even the asylum?" Rose asked, holding her mother's hand. Victoria thought about that for a long moment. "Not even that," she said finally, "because without the asylum, I never would have escaped. And without escaping, I never would have found my way to your father. Every terrible thing I endured led me to him, and he was worth it. He was worth everything." She died peacefully 2 days later on a beautiful May morning, with sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of horses whinnying in the distance. Her last words were Gabriel, and her children liked to think she saw him waiting for her. Victoria was buried beside Gabriel on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple: Victoria Everett Emerson, 1856-1928. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and fighter for justice. In the years that followed, the Emerson family continued to thrive. James took over the ranch and ran it until his own death in 1955. Rose became one of the most prominent women's rights lawyers in the country, arguing cases before the Supreme Court. Lily's veterinary practice became legendary, training a generation of new veterinarians. Thomas expanded the business into multiple states, ensuring the Emerson name was known throughout the West. And Grace, wild Grace, lived to be 97, still riding horses until her final year. The foundation Victoria established continued its work, helping thousands of women over the decades. Asylum reform became a national priority, and the worst abuses were gradually eliminated. It was not perfect, never perfect, but it was progress. And on that hill overlooking the ranch, two headstones stood side by side, monuments to a love that had conquered fear and injustice and time itself. Gabriel and Victoria, the cowboy and the asylum escapee, partners in life and in death, proof that sometimes the most unlikely meetings lead to the most beautiful endings. Their story became family legend passed down through generations. Great great grandchildren who never knew them still heard the tale of how Victoria escaped from the asylum and stumbled into Gabriel's stable, how he believed her when no one else would, how they built a life together from nothing but determination and love. And in the telling and retelling, the story took on a life of its own, inspiring new generations to believe in justice, to fight for what was right, to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves, to believe people when they said they were hurting, when they said they were being wronged, to offer faith when the world offered only doubt. Because in the end, that was the true legacy of Gabriel and Victoria Emerson, not the ranch or the money or the foundation, though those were all important. Their legacy was the simple but profound act of believing, of seeing someone at their lowest point and saying, I trust you, I believe you, you are not alone. That was the gift Gabriel gave Victoria all those years ago in a stable in Nevada, Missouri. And it was the gift Victoria gave back to the world, multiplied 1,000-fold, rippling out through time in waves of hope and healing and change. The sun set over the ranch every evening, golden light spilling across the hills where horses grazed peacefully. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, you could almost hear it, the sound of laughter, the murmur of voices, the echo of a love story that refused to be forgotten. Gabrielle and Victoria, together still, watching over the family they created and the legacy they built, a testament to the power of believing in someone when no one else will. Their story did not end with death. It lived on in every woman who fought for her freedom, in every person who chose to believe rather than doubt, in every act of courage and kindness that pushed back against injustice. It lived on in the Emerson family, in the way they treated others with respect and compassion, in the way they stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. And most of all, it lived on in the memory of that moment when a desperate young woman walked into a stable and a kind young man said the words she needed most to hear, I believe you. That belief changed everything. It saved a life, sparked a love, built a family, inspired a movement, all from 3 simple words. I believe you. That was the true story of Gabriel and Victoria Emerson, not just a tale of escape and love, though it was those things, but a story about the transformative power of faith, the strength that comes from being seen and heard and believed. A reminder that sometimes the most important thing we can offer another person is not rescue or solutions, but simply the willingness to trust their truth. And in a world that so often doubted women, that locked them away for being inconvenient or speaking out, that dismissed their pain and silenced their voices, those 3 words were nothing short of revolutionary. I believe you. Gabriel had given Victoria that gift, and she had spent the rest of her life paying it forward, believing others when no one else would, fighting for their freedom as Gabriel had fought for hers. And together, they had made a difference, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of countless others who came after them. That was their legacy. That was their story. A love story, yes, but also a story of justice and courage and the unshakable belief that every person deserves to be heard, to be trusted, to be free. And on that hill overlooking the ranch, 2 headstones stood as eternal witnesses to that truth, catching the last light of every sunset, solid and enduring and true. Gabriel and Victoria Emerson. He believed her when no one else did. She escaped the asylum they wrongly sent her to. Together, they changed the world.